Are you ready?
Yes, Acre.
Let's go.
This is podcast 28. We have the headmaster of the Chesterton Academy here in Akron, Rocco. Thank you.
Right here.
You guys were kind enough to put up the sign and everything.
Oh, yeah?
You were kind enough to bring it.
This is true.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe it's staying here.
Yeah, why not?
We are sponsored now. It's our first sponsorship.
With all of our sponsorship budget right now.
Yeah.
This
With-
was our first pay, actually.
Actually, yeah.
'Cause, we got some mugs.
And there's some other books somewhere out. My daughter may have wandered off and read them.
Well read, just like her father. That's
Yes.
that's what we need.
Reach.
So
Start 'em up young.
Exactly. But Rocco, it's really really grateful for you to come on. I was talking to Father Belichick in my head. We're getting Rocco on, and he was like, "Yes, I'm gonna watch that one." I was like, "All right, the other 27, you know, but Rocco, yes." So that's awesome. But
I'll have to ask him about this and quiz him like in 2 weeks. Be like, so,
What'd you think?
I don't think he'll have notes like you did. I'm hoping he's watched it. He said he's gonna watch it. So
Although, to be fair, there's been about 3 or 4 that he said, "Oh, I'm definitely gonna watch that one," and then no.
you got to follow up.
we gotta get better on follow up. But so you are a Akron native, born and raised Akron area, and you started you went to high school at St. Mary's.
I did.
Catholic high school. How was that?
So, the reason I went there wasn't for any glorious Catholic reason, actually. The reason I went there is because I was going to Coventry at the time, and where had that been? Yeah. So the way Coventry did it at the time is they had block scheduling, so you just went real intense for one semester and then basically like college. And first semester was great. I had a phenomenal math teacher who really encouraged me. I could do matrix multiplication in my head, and I was the annoying kid who had like half a sheet of paper, and like that was just like doing 12-digit addition that I just didn't want to hold in my head. And my teacher's like, "Can you actually do that?"
Yeah.
I'm like, "Yes." And so she made me go to the board, and I proved that I could do this. And phenomenal, really encouraged everything and helped me do extra work and go above and beyond. But then the next class, trigonometry and statistics.
A little bit different.
I feel unchristian just talking about this class. But the results of that class were me literally reading the newspaper in class. I spent that hour and a half reading the newspaper, and at the end, because I had such contempt for the teacher and how she was conducting the class, and I got a B.
Oh, hey.
And my dad's like, "Well, you're not getting anywhere good now." Kind of shot yourself in the foot with that one, Rock. So I'm like, well, what are we going to do to actually get you into a real school, like a real college? And so it's like, well, there are Catholic high schools in the area. They usually do a pretty good job of that's their thing, right? And so the result of that summer was actually me going to St. V so that I could get into a good college. Some people's parents at this table would disagree that it was a good college because I went to the University of Notre Dame. Some people may have heard of it. Some people may not have. It's a small school in nowhere, Indiana. I feel like I just insulted half my friends out there.
I was gonna say, those are fighting words right there.
But I enjoyed it. It wasn't the Catholic experience I had had. One of the things I had gotten used to doing at Coventry was the coursework was so easy I could pray the whole rosary during the day. Now, when I was your age, there were still only 15 decades. 15 decades. So it wasn't as long. But I could do that, no problem. There was no need for me to do homework ever, because whatever.
It definitely adds new depth, though, to the idea that you could do an entire rosary in one day.
And read the newspaper, one of my classes.
And still
Spiritual
manage to
growth, being aware of the world around me, it was great. It was great formation, just for not any of the normal reasons.
Mm-hmm.
But it was really fun. It was a small marching band. I loved that.
Mm.
And I only want to talk about this a little bit. I know that LeBron James also went to that same high school, and I believe you guys went there at the same time.
Yeah, let me tell you what, that wrecks you for basketball.
Yeah.
Well, because one of the things with LeBron is everyone talks about and focuses on him because he's talented, right?
Right.
Some would say.
Yeah.
Some would say.
Some would say. Other people are just jealous.
Yeah.
Well, he also had 3 of the buddies that he went to the JCC with regularly. 3 of his good friends who he's played basketball with before, and the coach is one of the kids' dads.
Interesting.
Yeah, 2 of the other guys went and played for European basketball.
Oh.
And then The other guy went and got drafted by Ohio State to play football, apparently. So athletic, yes. But they were a team already, and
Right.
you just threw in another random fifth person.
Did he take your spot, like on the varsity team?
We don't talk about that. Obviously, no. I was in the band. I was a tuba player, gloriously.
Gloriously.
But yeah, like I got to watch really good. I'm watching no-look passes in high school.
Yeah.
I'm watching like actual proper ball handling and fundamentals being executed on a level like you just don't see. And then comes senior year when it's like, wait, I completely have this in the bag. We have this in the bag as a team. He didn't care. Like if you were going to, if the choice was knocking out as hard and dominantly as he could and intimidating you and everyone in the stands behind you, he would. He would just leap up, and the power behind it, like I think he nearly broke a scoreboard once.
Oh my gosh.
It was just this wonderful meaty thunk on a basketball.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, you're not getting a basket today.
He was already a really big guy in high school too. Like just absolutely ginormous.
Yeah, and then I went off to college, and it's like, oh.
It's like, yeah, go team.
Let's go team.
Oh, we're all just going to follow around the one guy who wants the basketball and the glory. Okay, well, I guess we're losing this one. Oh, we're all going to try to shoot three-pointers because they look cool.
You did go from one great sports school to another. Notre Dame is also fantastically known for football and even basketball, I think, to some extent.
And the best part is I went with the quarterback was Brady Quinn that year.
Okay.
A phenomenal quarterback, and ended up, both of them got drafted to crummy Cleveland teams. So Brady went off to Cleveland, and then Cleveland did what Cleveland did at the time and destroyed your football career.
They still do that.
I know.
Well, although not as much anymore. Now
It is
they
my
rejuvenate-
favorite Halloween decoration. People put like the Browns quarterback graveyard, and it's like a dozen and a half tombstones.
Oh my gosh.
It's so excessive. Like, I came from Chicago, and our football team is not any better. But
The Bears, the Bears, the
the
Bears.
Bears. But the Browns fans are so enthusiastic. I feel so bad for them. Because every year is their year, and they believe that in their very soul.
We got a first down. We're going all the way.
Oh, yeah. He caught the ball. We're winning. And it almost came kind of close with Mr. Flacco. But, I mean,
It was a big hope. It was a big hope.
It's just great because in the 90s, we sold the franchise to Baltimore.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had seller's remorse, like, immediately. It's like, maybe we'll restart
We
the
should-
Browns.
Yeah. I always kind of laugh at that because, they're in the same division still, the Ravens, and I wonder if some of that feeds into the rivalry of the Browns, because the Browns have just been absolutely dominated historically by the Ravens over the last 20 years, and it's kind of funny because, they always see one of their teams win in Cleveland because, the Ravens are still basically their team. It's the same franchise, at least.
It is. I always say that the Ravens are the Browns.
Yeah.
But going to Notre Dame. So when I think of Notre Dame, I think of the movie Rudy. That is one of my favorite movies ever. But it is an amazing historical college. How was your experience there, and how is that kind of translating into what you're doing now?
Absolutely phenomenal. I went to Notre Dame because I wanted an academically rigorous experience, but I had also, thanks in no small part to praying the rosary all the way through every day, had a real reversion, and that was my conversion experience. It made the faith my own. And where do those two meet? And back in those days, we had these things called optical discs, compact discs. So they came with these really chintzy, gimmicky ways to search for a college, and I put in, a decent sized school, not like 5 people, and I wanted primarily rigorous and Catholic, and it gave me 3. Boston College, the alma mater of another former podcast, Michael Saltis, who went to the University of Dayton, go Flyers, and then Notre Dame. I'm like, okay. And the only one that appealed to me was Notre Dame. And it was so great. I didn't really talk about my time at Notre Dame for years.
Really?
Yeah, I was dating another girl at Notre Dame. I was living here. And I think it was when St. Sebastian first started a real young adult group, of which Vanni Vidi Vici is the 3rd successor of it.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And I heard people talk about oh man, college was the worst. It was so stressful. I hated it. And I was talking to my girlfriend at the time. I'm like, so wait, when you say you didn't like going to Notre Dame, she's like, yeah, Rocco, I hated it. I'm like, I didn't even cry. I thought everyone just loved college and enjoyed their time there, and it was just always this like great people. Like you get a good drink, you have fun, you tell stupid stories, and like this progression in the intellectual life. Like other people didn't have that experience, and it's like, oh.
Do you think you had sort of like a love for education that other people didn't at the time?
Probably because like my mom was a teacher growing up, and that's where we spent our spring break with her. She's still working at the same educational institution, actually.
At Notre Dame?
Oh no, at the JCC here in Akron.
Oh, okay, at the JCC. Okay. Oh, that's right. I forgot that because you were at the JCC.
Yeah, before I started this, I was BC for a while.
That's right.
But yeah, I loved it. There are 168 masses on campus every day. When Benedict released the motu proprio, they put a traditional Latin mass right there on campus. There was a great Novus Ordo, kind of what St. Paul's does at their 10:30 now. On Saturday mornings. Phenomenal, heavy-hitting intellectual Catholic community. That's where I learned to pray the Divine Office. I went to actually the priest who used to. There's a book called the Ordo.
Okay.
And it's basically you'll see it in a sacristy. It's what the priest figures out real quick. A nice reference. Who we're celebrating today? What vestments do I need to put on? What reading? Like what are my options for today? And he actually edited it for all the dioceses in the United States and a couple religious orders. And he's the one who taught me how to pray the office. So I had this phenomenal spiritual experience. Like my prayer life grew and deepened, in part because by the time I got to senior year, I had worked for 3 years to make sure my senior year was going to be easy, and it worked. Nice. My second semester, I had 4 classes, 1 Monday, 1 Tuesday, 1 Wednesday, and 1 Thursday. And for those of you playing the home game, that adds up to 4. And they were all afternoon. I had the ideal second semester senior schedule.
Wow.
It was perfect. It's like I could get as hammered as I wanted. I could have as many 75-cent well drinks at the dueling piano bar the night before, and I was still going to wake up by noon.
Yeah.
Some people suffer from senioritis, but it sounds like you actually thrived in senioritis.
Well, here's the thing. I didn't. Because I would sit there and I would just keep waking up whenever in the morning, like sleeping as long as I want, and I started realizing, like, what am I doing? I'm at Notre Dame as a senior, and my social life is what, like going out to a different bar every night? Not that I was like getting hammered. I was a college senior. I didn't have that much money. I majored in humanities. But still, like my social life is going out to bars or hanging out and drinking in someone's room or at their house off campus, and then just wasting my morning. I don't need to sleep until 11. Like especially if I'm going to bed at midnight, 1 o'clock. Like I'm 21. I can wake up at 7 o'clock in the morning and I'd be fine. Roll out of bed. I'm immortal. So it's like, what on earth am I supposed to do? And one of the nice things about Notre Dame is they have a chapel in every dorm. And I was in the largest dorm on campus at the time, Dillon Hall. Go Big Red. God bless Paul Doyle. And my room was right there by the chapel. It's just like, well, you know what I can't do? I can just wake up in the morning and go in the chapel. So I would do a holy hour, sometimes 2. Like I had the chapel to myself half the time because no one's really thinking about doing that in the morning. They're busy getting off to class or something like that. And it was phenomenal. Like just having that time alone, and I felt the change fairly quickly in my life. Like just feeling less lethargic, less miserable all the time. So I tried the typical college experience, hated it.
I mean, most people think they do. It's fun in the time, but it's over time. You just look back and it's like, what would you do? I'm blessed. I actually didn't like really go to a real college because I would have done exactly what you did, but probably worse because I had 0 self-control. And like I went to Stark State for emergency fire service. So on Saturday mornings we had our long fire class, 8 hours long, and it's first 4 hours in class. Next 4 were full gear working. We would get so hammered Friday night. We would go. It's horrible. I never told my parents that. I'm sorry, Mom. We would, I would get to his apartment, my buddy's apartment. I was to stay there because it started at like 7 o'clock in the morning. I would get there around 9 o'clock. We would take a bunch of shots, copy our homework, So someone ever sent us pictures. By that time, it hit. We would probably party till 3, 4 in the morning, get up at 7, and then go to the fire academy. It was horribly unhealthy. But that's
very
just like
well organized.
we had it down to a science, and unfortunately, but it's like having that ability to have that chapel is such a blessing. And I'm curious, do you have any affiliation with Notre Dame now, or do you know how everyone's doing now? Is it when I think of a Catholic college, I think of like Ave Maria, Franciscan, Christendom, stuff, college like that. Notre Dame, I know is Catholic, but is it still like at that kind of level?
So the problem is there have been a lot of stupid decisions made for decades, right? And it takes a long time to come back from that. People ask, like, would you send your child there? I'm like, well, if she can find a way to afford it, yes. Because I know people who are still there, people that I was friends with. And oddly enough, my wife actually converted while she was there. It still happens. It's still a fairly common occurrence.
Mm-hmm.
Like the RCIA, the confirmation classes are usually pretty well stocked with people every year because people suddenly is like, oh, wait, like there's something here. Now, you can also go and find just absolute dissolution if you want. Like, it's there. I haven't been on campus life. Actually, no, I was there when Francis and I met in the winter, like in January of 2021.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, everyone's masked up. It's winter in South Bend, Indiana, so, like,
Cool.
Honestly, I started thinking everyone's wearing the mask because it just kept your face warm. Because it did. It's like, I understand now. But yeah, there was no one around, so there wasn't really a good idea of what campus life was like at all.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I don't know anyone who's there right now, actually, I don't think.
Yeah, I think the thing that it probably suffers from the most is just the fact that it's so huge. I mean, it's a lot bigger than Franciscan is. And, I mean, if you think about it, numerically speaking, I would probably venture to guess that the number of Catholics that are at that are at Notre Dame is probably still somewhat comparable to that of Franciscan, just because of the sheer amount of people that actually go to Notre Dame as opposed to the people that actually go to
Oh, yeah, it's still
Franciscan.
probably around 80% Catholic at least.
Right. Whether or not they're practicing, no, right.
Yeah.
But having the ability to have those chapels like that,
Mhm.
like
And
now
that's-
with my mind now, it's perfect. Like that would be ideal. But
That, and then you had, like, because it wasn't just that. For me, it was, like, obviously you need that grace-filled opportunity, that moment that Christ is going to catch you on the hook. But there was that intellectual life
Mhm.
that helped keep everything going. I couldn't just slack off mentally. We would joke that the nice difference between Notre Dame and state schools is most state schools you just drink all week long and you just don't sober up. It's like, well, at Notre Dame we have to fit all that drinking into a weekend. We got Friday, we got Saturday because we got other things to do. It's like, well, I was in the marching band. I'm wiped after, so I got to fit all that in on a Friday. One of my friends, he would just like, Notre Dame students always know their numbers.
Mhm.
Like, you know, like, okay, this is I can still operate a motor vehicle.
yeah,
This is someone else gets my keys. This is I start praying to merciful God because I know already tomorrow morning is going to be the worst. And it's like, well, you have an entire campus full of nerds who work very hard on generating a very rigorous data set. And we can all extrapolate the data. We can see where those best fit curves are.
It's funny, I had a similar thing. I went to a Catholic school in France. And I remember the first weekend that I was there, I was 18, obviously. I just graduated high school. And, you know, the drinking age in America is 21. I grew up in a homeschooled Catholic family, so the idea of drinking before that kind of age was very, very foreign, almost unheard of. Although my parents would have been a little bit more lenient on it than a lot of other Catholic homeschool parents probably would have been. But I remember the first weekend that I was there, and it was someone's birthday. I think it was our dean, his birthday. And he offered me a drink, and I was like, oh man, this is awesome. He had a drink, we all drank together. I'm 18, I'm like, this is the coolest thing I've ever done. I'm drinking with people that are like 40 years old. And then he offered me another drink, and then another drink. And pretty soon, we're all a little bit drunk. We're feeling, I'm like, man, this is so cool. I'm like, you guys are all Catholic, and they're like, I can't believe you guys are drinking this much. And they're like, dude, we're drinking this much because we're Catholic. It's like, this is what Catholics do. We're not puritanical.
Wherever the
Protestants.
Catholic sun doth shine, there's fellowship and good red wine.
Exactly.
I'm not heard though. I love that.
Yeah.
It's Hilaire Belloc. Wherever the Catholic sun doth shine, there's fellowship and good red wine. At least I've always found it so. Benedicamus Davino. So
He was friends
I know
with-
some poetry. I am a vaguely cultured individual.
Well, you also like G.K. Chesterton,
This is
which
true.
we are going to talk about. One of the things that I wanted to kind of ask you, get your thoughts on, because it seems like with your experience at Notre Dame, one of the things that is really important in just any person's typical life, if you're Catholic, for example, is to find a reminder in your life to kind of live your life. And for you, it seems like you had sort of a physical reminder in that you had a chapel in your dorm. And you realized, man, I really need to wake up and I need to fill my time with something else. And you filled it with that chapel. Chesterton does a really, really good job of kind of reminding people of the spiritual aspect of their lives by bringing to mind very, very simple objects like sidewalks, like leaves, like grass. You know, it's all those kind of short
Cheese,
stories are like,
chalk, asparagus.
exactly, yeah. Finding God in the sidewalk or something like that. Is that something that you take into just your everyday life?
It's something I have tried to do. I was prepped for it because when I think I was in high school maybe at the time, I was watching the Trinity Broadcast Network.
Mm-hmm.
Great Protestant TV show, or television station actually. And they had a rerun of, I'm gonna say it here, Saint Fulton Sheen. It was Saint Fulton Sheen on the TV, and it was his Life is Worth Living program, and I'm like, this is phenomenal. So I would try to watch it when I was home, and then when I was in college, I started trying to watch it more. I mean, we didn't get cable until I was a junior, and I could have my little TV plugged right into the coax. I'm like, yeah, Sunday evening, 6:30, I'm watching my Sheen. I wasn't wearing a cardigan and like sipping on warm tea. I was sitting on the floor in the dorm room because I was a bachelor male.
Oh my god.
Oh, you've both been bachelors. Don't pretend like.
I know exactly what you're talking
There's
about.
a picture when we first moved in together. It was just lawn chair.
Yep.
I think our garbage can was a
Oh, it was a
cardboard box for a
box.
while.
Yep, for a
I
long
think-
time.
Oh, at least a couple months.
Until Ashley threw it out.
Yeah.
My wife, my future wife. At the time, she was my girlfriend. And,
My wife was applauding.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I remember I was kind of annoyed at it because we didn't have a garbage can, I think.
Then I went going. Everything that we had in that apartment was given to us, or I asked for it from somebody. Like, oh, you have an extra lamp there? We don't have a lamp in our apartment. Oh, you want it? Yeah, sure.
Are
You're
you
offering.
using that TV?
Are you gonna finish that plate of food?
We actually found our TV on the ground.
We did.
on the outside, on the side of the road.
That's great.
Yep. It worked until it broke.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was watching Fulton Sheen, and he has like "The Life is Worth Living" was the title, and they wanted to be that because his producer's like, well, maybe we should ask the inquisitive version and be like, is life worth living? He's like, no, life is worth living, and he has a great line. There are two ways that you can wake up in the morning. Good morning, God, or good God morning. I'm like, I feel attacked. So I actually worked for the rest of college actually to develop the habit of saying that. Good morning, God,
Yeah,
not
good
the other
morning,
one.
God.
And disciplining myself to enjoy it. Yeah, my wife is showing me the Chesterton quote that I can only say that's out of context.
We could probably show it to the camera.
So
One of
the
them.
society, and I need to yell at Dale Alquist about this. Daybreak is a never-ending glory. Getting out of bed is a never-ending nuisance. I'm like, that just seems anti-Chestertonian. Because he has that love of everything. Every day
Yes.
is a gift. And what does that mean? That every day is a gift.
Mm-hmm.
That means everything that is coming to you that day is a gift. And how are you going to react to it? And it was kind of funny. I was looking at the beginning of Everlasting Man, and he talks about one of my favorite Chesterton stories, Man Alive. I read it at least once or twice every year.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a story about what if you really tried to hang on to like that childlike surprise and wonder and innocence of everything in the world?
Mm-hmm.
Like, why do I care about these little football-shaped mugs? Because they're shaped like little footballs. Isn't that nifty? We're drinking out of little footballs.
Yeah.
Like, how cool is that?
There's a limoncello inside of them.
I know, isn't
They
that
have
great?
an Italian drink inside of an American-shaped, iconic football. Not
Check
even
it
a
out.
mug.
Right
Yeah,
bore
sure.
the Super Bowl.
I was right. And I do like that about Chesterton, that focus on it's your attitude and how you engage with the world. It really puts it in perspective. I was listening to another podcast, and they were talking about the word cringe that you kids use nowadays, and it'll be like, that pod was cringe, and it's like, no, it wasn't. You cringed at the podcast. Like, it doesn't adhere in the item. It's your emotional state, and you are just being so narcissistic that you have to inflict your emotional state on other things. It's like being like, that's boring. It's like, things are not boring. Boring is an experience felt by people, and I'm sorry to say that apparently you find yourself boring. It's like, well, it's not entertaining. It's like, okay, so you're not being engaged by it for how long? 3 seconds before you already like zoned out and had to just be alone with your own thoughts.
Right.
And then you were like, I hate this experience. Oh no, this is the worst experience. Like, something distract me. I need more entertainment.
Right. Yeah, he definitely points out the necessity of taking kind of accountability for just your own being and how you experience the world, which is really nice. It's very opposite of, it's very anti-modern, right? Because nowadays everything is, not necessarily about how you should react to things. Everything is just about how you react to things, and unfortunately everyone is trained nowadays to react to everything negatively. Whereas back then, there was no problem like just saying you should be happy about this. You should try to be happy about this. My uncle wrote an autobiography, or not my uncle, but my great uncle wrote an autobiography that was titled "The Lucky Person Has Only to Be Born," and that's just the truest statement of life. The luckiest person has only to be born, right? Because that's all it takes to be happy, is that one requirement, to be born. Also, I didn't mean to get us completely off topic, because we still need to get into your story about how you started the Chesterton Academy. Because we can get more into the nitty-gritty of Chesterton and who he was, kind of maybe in the second.
Yeah, because I would love to learn more about Chesterton. In the podcast that's releasing tomorrow, which is like 2 weeks from this podcast, I told you before the podcast, I'm not very well read and don't know too much about Chesterton. Like I told you, I was starting to listen to a little bit of orthodoxy, but I would love to dive into it. But yeah, like Ben said, before we get into that, the Chesterton Academy, how did that start? I know you said you were at the JCC teaching beforehand. Where did this opportunity come from?
So it's part of a network of schools, and the way it actually starts is Dale Ahlquist, the head of the Literary Society, and a buddy were talking about how they wanted classical Catholic education for their kids in the Twin Cities, and there just wasn't that. And they're like, well, let's start a school and see how hard can it be. So they found out. And then as like this classical education renaissance keeps on going, and more people are like, we've experimented with education long enough. Common Core is not common sense. Like, this is not going to... I'm tired of treating kids like an experiment. I can't help my kid with their own homework. They can't turn to me as a parent and have any concept that I know what I'm talking about, because you changed math and numbers. So more people would go to Dale and the network, or the original academy, and be like, hey, what did you guys do? Can we help? And they'd be like, well, here's what we did. Like, good luck. But it quickly morphed into this best practices, crowdsourcing, like, feedback loop of this is what worked for us. Like, oh, like this, you're having this problem. Like, I think I have something that could help. Like, or just someone to complain about and be like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I'm going to make it. It's like, no, you're doing fine. Trust me, we were there.
Yeah.
You get through it. It doesn't feel like it ever, but you get through it, which is phenomenally important. Just that other person to talk to, iron sharpens iron, whether you want to call it that or not. And so, at the time, this was back in 2016, I was dating a girl who was from Minnesota, and she had finished her program at Notre Dame and had moved home. I'm like, well, I would like to live by my girlfriend for the first time in our 4-year long-distance relationship. So I looked, I'm like, wouldn't that be great if there was like a Chesterton school and it happened to be like around the Twin Cities in Minnesota? That would be phenomenal. And I stumbled across the original one. I'm like, I could never teach at a place like that. And then I dropped it until 2 years later. 3 years later. And Father Valenchuk and I were going out to the Chesterton Conference, the annual Society Literary Conference. And we just happened to meet one guy. He had converted from Protestantism to Catholicism. And the school he was working at, it's like, well, we're a very faith-based Protestant school. We can't keep you on. Like, that would go against our, like, mission. We're not going to fire you this year, but, like, we can't hire you back because, again...
Scandalous.
Right.
Right.
You wish more institutions would be that centric, right?
Right. Right.
So, and we're just talking to this guy, and he literally has driven to, it was in Overland Park, Kansas that year, which is 45 minutes to the west of Kansas City. So if anyone says, oh yeah, we're going to have a conference in Kansas City, and it says Overland Park, Kansas, Dale Alquist, you're a liar, and you can leave that in. It was a 45-minute cab ride. But yeah, we're just talking to the guy, and he has everything. He's moved from Virginia. His life is in his car, and he's going out to Denver to be the headmaster there. I'm like, this is great. He's talking about the school. He's talking about interested in it. I'm like, amazing. And at that conference, they were also making a push about the Chesterton Schools Network, the mother organization they had made to help coordinate all of this. And they were helping people, like, how do you start one? And we're like, there would be a lot of people who would be very interested in something like this in Akron. So we went to the session, we came back, and it's like, hey, we'll look into this. And the very first Sunday, 1 week after I get back in town, I'm meeting up with, he now has 3 kids at the school, one of the original founding families, Ivan Ortiz, and he calls his son over. He's like, hey, how old are you? He's like, I'm in 8th grade. He's like, okay, we need to do this next year. It's like, it's supposed to be a 2-year process, but okay, we'll see what we can do.
That was such a good impression. I'm sorry. Not to interrupt you, but that was such.
I thought he was here.
Yeah.
So yeah, we started. It was fall of 2019. Like, this is great. We're getting a lot of traction. We'd sent a letter to then Bishop Perez, being like, hey, we want to do this, and then he got moved. We're like, oh, that's annoying, but we can still go forward. We just can't be a Catholic school. Whatever. Like, we'll worry about it when we get another bishop, and then we'll be established, and we can actually show what we are. And then the world shut down, and we're like, oh, well, this is going to make it a lot harder. And it did. It made it a lot harder. But we actually managed to get 3 students on board for that fall. So fall of 2020, it's me, 3 kids, and basically a dining room table. And we're just starting this adventure. And every year we've grown. We've added more students. We've added a few more staff. And it's just more people know about us. Now I'm appearing on very popular podcasts. So
We need a sign that says "Just like you and me."
Once we get the
Really
logo,
badly.
Simon. Once we get the logo,
Yeah, I was gonna say because he said I'm on a very very famous podcast. I really just wanted to point to the sign, but it's not there.
and you can't really point there.
see, this is actually a hostile takeover. This is now the Chesterton Academy of
This is-
Akron.
It is.
Now we need to rebrand the podcast to the Chesterton Academy Podcast.
It will not be mandatory. All guests have to smoke cigars.
Fine.
I
Hands
will have to
tied.
ask my wife about that one.
Pipes can be optional. I don't want to look back at my wife because I know she's glaring a hole through it right now. I can feel it.
We should get those
I love you.
those SpongeBob pipes, the bubble ones.
Yeah.
Or is that VeggieTales where Larry, the one with Sherlock Holmes, where he's smoking like a bubble pipe or something like that?
Probably.
I think it's SpongeBob, but I can't remember. It's one of them. We can see now we have a fact checker. So this is why you always have someone behind the camera.
Yeah, so for those of you that are wondering, apparently it is true that goldfish have a longer attention span than the modern, at least teenager, if not actual adult. About 7 seconds to 9 seconds, apparently.
That was actually fact checked. That is true.
So talking about the Chesterton Academy, what exactly is it if someone doesn't know?
So we talk about ourselves as classical Catholic education. And there's a lot of things that can mean. Dale has a joke. If you're ever stuck on a desert island, just stranded, start a classical Catholic school, because at least 3 people will show up telling you how you're doing it wrong. You know what? He's not wrong. Because there's a lot of different definitions. Is it just, reading, writing, arithmetic, like focusing on the liberal arts?
Mm-hmm.
Is it, oh no, we have to read only books before a certain time? Are you doing like a more John Senior, Mortimer Adler, like these 54 volumes, and this is what we're going to focus on? So, Ivan and I were talking about this the other day. We're not quite, I wouldn't call this necessarily a great books program. Like, you're not going to get around the great books. Like, they've been time tested, and we call them great
books.
for a reason. But one of the things is you have a stronger midwife because you're looking at it through the lens of the church. you're taking a stance that, well, we say Catholicism is true. Maybe we should apply that. Maybe we should take that into consideration. Maybe it would have an effect for how we view history, what literature is saying. Maybe it would have just a general effect on how we comport ourselves during the school day.
Mm-hmm.
Because it does. It's about that virtue formation. It's about that whole human formation. And one of the great things that talk about, there are 2 anthropologies being outlined in all 4 years of the curriculum. Because we go chronologically. We start in the ancient world, and we end with roughly the modern world. And we start like, here's all the pagans, here's what's going on in the Old Testament, here's how these noble pagans are like working out reason, faith, piety, tradition, all these things that, we as Catholics talk about a lot. And we're talking about them with regard to pagans. And the intellectual work, the bases, that's a plural, bases, right?
Yep.
The bases for what America ends up becoming. We're working all these out. We're going into philosophy and looking at, I love it because freshman year we usually read something called the Gorgias. It's one of Plato's dialogues. And in it there's this great scene with this guy, Callicles, who's coming up to defend what is justice, where does it come from? And he basically has Nietzsche's will to power 2 millennia before Nietzsche. And everyone like, oh, Nietzsche, like I'm an edgelord, and like, oh, I've read like 1 teacher's paper on Nietzsche, and I know exactly what he's talking about. It's like, no, you don't, 1. And 2, Socrates was mocking that in like 400 BC. You're 2 millennia late to the party, son. And so you get to see all this. And then sophomore year, you do the arrival of Christ and how the world just changes. Things are now different. And you get to start exploring that sad occasion known as the fall of Rome.
How often do you think about that, by the way? I'm sorry.
Well, it's funny because, like, I mean, I get paid to think about that multiple times a day, actually.
That's so beautiful.
I was literally looking up wall maps of Italy and the Mediterranean with the entire concept, like, well, I can't use this political map. Like, all the borders are wrong. Everything's Rome. So this is part of my day-to-day.
Oh,
But yeah, I literally have a job where I get paid multiple times to think about the Roman Empire, and it's phenomenal. Yeah, it's everything you think it could be. The Roman Empire and Jesus. What more does a Catholic male need? A wife. A wife.
A wife, yeah.
Oh, wife.
I thought of it the second I said it.
Yep, she's looking at it.
I'm not wrong.
No, you're not.
I'm not wrong. This prolonged bachelorhood is proven to be toxic on everyone's points. Like, I didn't get married until I was in my 30s. And let me tell you, it's a lot easier to get married to someone when you're young and you don't know anything yet, because now you're set in your ways, and the other person, especially if they got married older, set in theirs, and those hit, and you're both like, well, my comfort zone. No, my comfort zone. Now we're both miserable and uncomfortable.
Yep.
And there's not a real win. We both have to take a loss. Like, it might just be dropping the whole thing sometimes, like, just depending. And that's a lot easier to do when you're younger and haven't had that self-discipline and becoming a horrible, selfish jerk.
Yes.
That tends to happen and be encouraged in modern society.
I'm not speaking from experience, but I definitely agree with you. 100%.
Well, good. You're agreeing with wisdom. I'm humble, I know. One of the perks I've picked up over the years.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off in your train of thought either. Sophomore year, Roman Empire.
So yeah, we talk about that, and well, what happens? Well, Gregory the Great comes together. He's a capable administrator, and he starts trying to hold things together. Different people start rising up and start trying to deal with it. And what are these consequences? And you have people like Charlemagne the Great, like putting this big, huge empire together that we end up calling the Holy Roman Empire, because of certain heresies in the East, in part, and the fact that the Roman Empire no longer included the city of Rome, which is historically awkward. Okay, and physically awkward. Like,
And physically awkward, yeah, I was going to say.
there's that too. But you get to watch how things start developing. Like, Charlemagne starts trying to put people he trusts in power. So you start having nobles who are also bishops. And because they're nobles, they're getting appointed by the king. And you start getting this lay investiture controversy, which doesn't go away in the church. China document, anyone? it's still an issue today. We talked about it in the 900s. It's still an issue. Thomas Becket gets made Archbishop of Canterbury in part because Henry II uses that concept of like, oh, the Archbishop of Canterbury is dead. I want my buddy in that position. I'll write the Pope, tell him.
Yep.
Like it ends up following all these things, and now you have these nobles who are bishops, and they're not going to give away, like the diocese and the state government become inseparable. So now, well, who can be the next person in charge? Well, we can't just have the local duke saying mass. That's going to be a bit of a problem. But we can, if he's Duke Archbishop. Well, who gets to appoint the Duke Archbishop? Well, obviously it has to be the Vatican. Well, now some foreign power is appointing my governors. You know, now my people are just being told what to do by the Pope. America, know nothing's anyone. We start seeing all these things developing and how things start working, and this, what the church is doing, how the church is trying to grow and do things like the peace of God, the truth of God. Even calling the Crusades was an attempt to, like, we need to do something with European nobles and focus them. Like, that was honestly part of the reason was just we need a mission. Like, we got to get together, guys. More proximate reasons were, you know, certain recent happenings with Muslim takeovers and hostile Muslim takeovers that had happened in the East. But and then you start going into junior year where you're talking into like the early Renaissance, and this, you know, we've had 1,200 years of the church growing into like the dominant power. We have St. Thomas Aquinas and scholasticism, which is, you know, okay, what is the strongest argument I can come up against what I'm saying? And if I can take that down, I know I'm right. If not, oops.
He was really good at that.
Oops.
And just what that does for a philosophical underpinning. Like, no, I can't be, like, I mean, I could be wrong about this. We could have another reason that'll crop up. But what I've done is I've made sure we at least have a very, very, very good working model. And we can, when you have a good working world model, you can do stuff with that. And you get to see how all that's going, but you also have like the rise of paganism coming back, because now we're going back to the way things were in the olden days, and that's just bringing in this unfortunate concept. And it's going to end poorly. And we end junior year with the Protestant Revolution and the unpleasantness with Henry VIII.
It's a good way of describing it.
The extreme unpleasantness of Henry VIII. And then in senior year, we start building up around what's been going on since then, how the further fracturing of religious unity causes a lot more religious infighting than actual prayer. How things like Henry VIII being like, haha, I own all the monasteries now. I now have more money than God. And I have given it to so many nobles that when, you know, a couple hundred years later, people are inventing like steam engines and things like that, there's someone around who has a lot of money to sink into capital expenses. And you know what? They're not necessarily based in Catholicism and the dignity of the human person.
Right.
And please, sir, may I have some more?
Yeah.
And you start watching how all this starts breaking down religion more, breaking down the soul of man. And you start getting the rise of this, you built up this wonderful, beautiful Christian anthropology that you can just look up at, like the Sistine Chapel and be like, wow. And then you start building up this secular anthropology and just showing what they're like, how they're, what they mean for a person, and which one is actually doing something, which one is actually bringing you, you know, joy, satisfaction, or are you just going to go out to a different bar every night and get plastered and then roll out of bed, go to your one class for the day, repeat.
Have you ever read Rise and Fall before?
I have not.
I'm blanking on the name of the author.
Wait.
Alexis something.
Okay, you're not talking about Gibbons.
No.
No, he's just the follower. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember. You can say that one.
We have our guy.
Phil, Alexis.
Yes, to Alexis de Tocqueville, thank you. So he has such a good idea. One of the things that he said was going to become a problem in America was our conceited view of history. And you see it in the way that education happens in America. What you just described as sort of a chronological approach to humanities and education is so vital to understanding the cycles of humanity, right? Because when you see the cycles, that's when you actually really get to see what the cause and effect to most things are in
And
education.
it's not just isolated to our history curriculum.
Exactly.
Our, like, freshman year in literature, we're reading the Iliad, we're reading the Odyssey, we're reading the Aeneid. We're going through ancient Greek plays. We're going through what the ancient world had as, like, their founding myths and stories.
Right.
We're going through the Old Testament. You're learning about what Christ is born into. You're reading, like, more time-appropriate literature. So you're getting to see these themes developing.
Right.
In the sciences, like freshman year in astronomy, you're talking about the ancient Greeks looking up at the stars and figuring out so much. You're figuring out how the ancient Greeks learned, wait, the world is round, and here's roughly the circumference of the Earth.
So the Earth is round?
Yeah, I know.
Okay. Crazy.
You know what's crazy is the Greeks figured that out more than 2,000 years ago, and there are still people that claim that it's flat. It's crazy that someone who didn't have an access to any, not even paper. They
A
didn't even
stick and a well. A stick and a well.
Yeah. Actually, right now is probably a good moment to take a pause in the podcast. Are you good with the pause?
Yeah, we'll take a break and we'll be right back. We're back. A little intermission. I hope you enjoyed our little
I missed
music.
you so much.
Yeah.
Dude, it was a dangerous trip up the stairs. Let me tell you.
We had enough time for me to make more limoncello. We're already on another batch.
Let me
Father
take
might
another
believe
one,
us.
Actually, now that you mentioned that, here, cheers.
To the great and the glorious, the Reverend John Valenchek,
Exactly.
our beloved
Yeah.
pastor.
So we're continuing talking about the Chesterton Academy, and I think it's beautiful what you're able to do going from the beginning of like our history, like literal history, going to now modern times. And we talked a little bit about it, but why would someone choose like that line of education versus just like a traditional Catholic high school?
So there can be a couple of different reasons. One, I mean, we have a lot of families, and Akron has a phenomenal homeschooling community of parents who are like, I like homeschooling my kid. Someone here is, had someone who homeschooled 10 kids all by herself and wouldn't give it up if you put a gun to her head because she loves the freedom it offers, and you know what? She can do it.
I don't know who you're referring to.
Yeah, couldn't be the lioness of the tribe of Beatty at all. So,
I love you, Mom.
I love you too, Sarah. Thank you for helping me out this year. I appreciate it. Please invite me to your parties. So,
Only if you bring that.
I will bring more limoncello. More will be made this week. So, but when it comes to other brick and mortar schools, you're going to have those niche differences where we're offering Mass basically every day. Right now, Tuesdays we don't, so we pray the Liturgy of the Hours together. We're working on having priests come in and do a rotation so that we actually have 5 days worth of Mass. The world itself of education at least, has moved on a lot from the classics and the things that built Western society. And you know what? A lot of parents are like, I don't like what education in the world has become. I want something strongly rooted, not maybe somewhat rooted. I want Christ to be the center of everything. I want everything revolving around that, even the sciences. I want people to show how this created universe and all these phenomenal laws that allow the universe to keep on operating work. There's a book by a man named Faraday on a candle. It's out of print now, but it's like 6 lectures I think he gave to the British Royal Academy or something like this on a candle. And it is full of that Chesterton subtle joy, because he's just talking about, it's like, I hope you'll be a philosopher with me, basically. Like doing philosopher, I hope you do this with me, and talk about like even how great the shape of a candle is, and like a good shape of a candle, or as a Platonist might say, the form. Actually, no, they would talk about an entirely different thing. But because the way a candle proper works is you have that little wick that is able to literally wick things up, and burn the solid fuel so it turns liquid, and can actually do that because if it didn't get hot enough to melt it, it wasn't going anywhere. It would just snuff itself out. If it got too hot, the candle would just melt itself very quickly. Like the second the heat hit the wax, it would just flop over and be a fire hazard. But it melts at just the right temperature. The inside gets hot enough to melt a pool of wax that the candle can use. The outside is cool enough to make a temporary cup. And then as it goes down, the wax at the top melts and keeps on going. It is this beautifully efficient little system. And how insane and phenomenal is it that it works? And he goes into all these little things about how, like, where's it hotter? Like, how you can put, like, a metal tube on top of a candle and you can light the top of it when you snuff out the candle. Like, all these phenomenal things that happen. And just reasoning out, like, what's going on here? And showing the beauty of it. People love that type of thing that, like, instills curiosity in that way. People like our more Socratic approach to things. The first day I did this, someone asked me, how was the first day of the academy? I'm like, it's great, the kids talk the whole time. And I just, like, that was a weird sentence. Because I think in any other school, if a teacher is saying that, they're reaching for a handle of whiskey or something. They talk the whole time. But this concept that, like, no, the students know a lot.
Yes.
There's a lot there. And building up that confidence in guiding them to realizing that. It's great. And, I mean, there are other people who are just like, well, I need a place to put my kid, and I like it. So, you have the gamut of, like, I go from this beautiful thing to, meh, I need my kid educated.
Right.
Some people like the fact that students who go from a Chester Academy, a lot of them go into seminaries, a lot of them go into some of the best Catholic colleges out there. And there is still this concept of, like, classical education being elitist and what the upper crust get. And Chesterton is very much not that. It's your blue-collar classical education. It's, no, this built Western civilization. This built what we inherited. All of us inherited. We should all know how we got here. Because then we can start making informed, intelligent decisions. And that is, when we were talking about this a little bit before the podcast started, about there's a big backlash to the classical education movement because it's inherently racist. I hear a lot of laughing in the room. So, because, like, oh, you're focusing on the Greeks, you're focusing on the Italians, like, where's all the great Eastern literature? And it's like, well, it didn't all affect us. It didn't all build what we were. Like, South Africa doesn't become the biggest player in geopolitics until much later. Carthage, Egypt is a huge player in history. Persia, huge. Rome and China knew each other existed, but they didn't really talk. And I will say, like, classicists as a rule are not racist people who only like those of a certain skin hue.
Right.
That's not part of being it. It's not that, oh, you have to have this culture and this culture is inherently superior. It's like, no, this culture is ours and built me, and I should probably understand what it is. And we were talking about, again, going back to the previous podcast, Godzilla. And Michael has a phenomenal understanding of the cultural rooting of that movie. And those movies. And as an American, you're watching, like, big dude, tiny town, yeah, carnage time, check out. But when you know about things like Japan dealing with the fallout of going from unassailable empire to occupied, what does that do to people? You've been nuked twice. What does that do to you? And then this one in particular, the one we watched at his birthday party, was dealing with Japan also wasn't always the nicest empire. They did a lot of things. Like, right? Empire, like, history is not filled with saints who are charitable everywhere. Like, it is filled with saints, but not everyone. You get to start appreciating that difference, seeing that difference. You have enough knowledge of yourself to start understanding it. Senior year, we really start reading Russian literature. And a lot of people have problems reading Russian literature, and I did for a while too. Because you read it like you read anything else from Western literature, and it's not going to work.
No.
America has had this problem forever of assuming that Russia is just like us. It's like, no, they're culturally different. When the Renaissance was happening, like when that great European culture engine fired up and was running on all cylinders, Russia was under the golden horde of the Mongols and was maintaining its Slavic Mongol concepts. It was not completely immune to ideas from the West, but it didn't have the same experience we did. And those were some crucial formative years. That was the teenagership of Europe. And it means that the way they just view things is different. And when you start realizing that, like one person was telling me, like, one of the great ways to understand Russian literature is it's about the conversations. People go away and like 6 months, 2 years elapse, and then they come back and have a conversation. Like, it's about what changed and how it changes the conversation. Like, it's not this necessarily this hyper plot driven thing. It's more introspective. And I found that to be a good way to look at it. Reading things like The Idiot, Brothers Karamazov.
Yeah.
I'm actually going through Crime and Punishment right now so that I can discuss it with one of my students.
Have you ever read Nikolai Gogol?
I've read parts of Gogol.
I just started reading. For Christmas, I got a collection of short stories, and it is funny to see how eerily similar he is to Dostoevsky, because they just both write so bluntly. And I don't know if part of that is because it's being translated and you don't really understand the warmth of how it's being translated, but that's the one thing that I have noticed, especially about Russian literature. It's just so blunt and pretty abrasive in many ways. It's not trying to fool you about emotions or anything like that.
And that's probably one of the fun things with fun quotes. My students will understand. Oh no, Mr. Galizio said fun. Be aware. Is that some English speaker had to try and choose English words, words that were shaped from an Anglo-Norman worldview, to articulate ideas that probably don't translate that well to English.
Yeah. Yep.
And you can only hope that maybe it was a Russian who learned English and was able to kind of like, he's not right. In Soviet Russia, novel translate.
Words always translate, but ideas don't necessarily translate because there's no language for ideas.
The Italians say every translator is a traitor.
Well, because they have Dante. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that's funny.
But that's beautiful how your school, it's remembering your past and going forward. Because I think especially in America, we don't really think about that. It's us now. We're super individualistic. It's me, how it's affecting me. Like we kind of talked in the beginning, how like, oh, that's boring. It's how you're perceiving it. It's you. And I think that's super important for us all to remember. And especially like the secular schools. Like I was homeschooled, so I never had to really deal with that. But seeing how people were in school and seeing now what they're teaching, it's when you have the government telling you what you need to be learning, it kind of gets a little bit fishy, mirroring the old church where you had the people with all the money putting their friends saying, hey, this is what you need. It's literally the same thing happening again, and we just don't realize it.
And it's interesting because, I mean, a lot of people in what people will call the Western canon are perfectly fine with a government doing something like that. It's like, no, you're a community and you need to have standards or else, well, you're not a community. Like someone needs to be there to help understand who is and who isn't, to enforce the values of the community.
Yeah.
But the big problem is, what are those values that are there, and do you have different values than me? Are those values such that we're going to turn off the cameras right now and there's only going to be two people at this table? Like what is that conflict like?
Yeah.
How can we somehow change someone's mind? Can we work something out? Is it a compromise? Is it one of us being like, oh my gosh, I was wrong? Booths. So I tell my freshmen this story because we start with Euclid and geometry. And the first thing we don't do any propositions. We're not making any triangles or squares.
Just the proofs.
It's just reading and definitions.
Oh, I hate
We spent 2 weeks doing it, and my students are like, a line is that which has no part. No, a point is that which has no part.
Yeah.
A line is breadth of like, oh, why are we doing this? It's like, and I tell them the story about booths. I was at a job at a small Catholic college out in Indiana, not Notre Dame, and they were talking about like one of the people she'd graduated. Now she's working as a hall director there, and she's like, oh, I'm so excited. Like, they might actually get booths for the student union, and I'm like, oh, great, these little study cubicles. Like, we have one tiny student union. It's about the size of, like, your living room and kitchen combined.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a glorious space. Like, we're in an old converted brothers living area. So, great. The one place people have to really come and, like, hang out is going to be occupied with a bunch of booths, and they're going to have TVs in them. Like, great. So you're going to have a study care where you can watch your own personal... This is the dumbest thing. And I would tell anyone what I thought about it. Well, it turns out she was also Italian. So one day we're standing outside of my hallway and we're having a conversation about this. It is getting animated, to say the least. Her friend is like, guys, calm down. Like, as far as we're concerned, we're having a discussion. But to anyone outside, they don't understand that cultural way of doing it. And I look at him and I point to the chapel, which is also off the building. I'm like, Jesus is right there. You can go talk to him. And then I don't miss a beat. I go right back to the argument. Until she says something that causes me to realize she means a restaurant booth. Oh, well, that's not that bad. That'd be really comfortable. Diffuse the whole situation immediately. I'm like, oh, that's great. We should do that.
That's so Italian. So this is a funny story. The first ever time that I went to Italy, I was in Rome when I was 15. I was lucky enough to go on a pilgrimage for Holy Week with a church that we used to be parishioners of back in Virginia. But I was there for Holy Week, and I remember we had just really landed in Italy probably within the last 8 hours. We had gone from the airport to this kind of little place, this chapter where these priests lived in this order. And out on the street, as we're walking in, I saw these two Italian men shouting at each other. And I mean, like, they're really shouting at each other. They're, like, the whole hand motions and everything like that. They're, like, yelling at each other fiercely. And I remember, like, hitting my friend on the shoulder. Like, dude, like, check these out. Like, these guys are just fighting on the street. And then 30 seconds later, they're hugging and they walk away. And I was like, man, what the heck was that? And the priest came and was like, oh, yeah, Italians just shout at each other. It's just normal.
We're passionate about what we know to be right. And because we are blessed enough to be Italians, that just happens to be everything. Why would I want you to be wrong? I'm trying to help you, Ben.
There you go. You're 100%.
But I tell my students that story to help them understand, like, that Augustinian sin is missing the mark. We don't, as a rule, choose evil because, yay, evil.
Mm-hmm.
We choose evil because we want the good that's there.
Mm-hmm.
And they have a data set that they've been informed with that's causing them to act this way, to make these choices. Like, you have to understand that, because if you're just going to be like, whatever, and just walk away, it's like, okay, but they could literally just not know.
Mm-hmm.
And all you've done is made it harder for the next person who's going to be like, well, actually, Jesus was fully God and fully man. Like, whatever, Arius rules.
Yeah, that's an interesting point to bring up, especially in just regards to the whole amount of, when you're trying to educate younger kids, you do really need to instill in them that idea of, you know, you might do things that are wrong, but you do have a desire for something that is always good. And you do wrong things not because you want to do wrong things. Like Aristotle has that really cool distinction where he says there's 4 types of people, right? There are the people who are bad, that love to do bad. They make a very small part of society. There are people who are bad, but they try to do good things. Then there are the people who are kind of good, but they do bad things, but they really don't want to do bad things. And then there are the good people that do really good things. And Aristotle kind of rightfully says that most people on this planet are the people that are good and try to do good things, but they end up doing bad things, right? It's just the whole distinction is like you have to really paint that inside kids. It's like you need to understand, like,
which St. Paul goes on and affirms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You need to point people and tell them that life is good. You need to seek out and do good things. And if you do bad things, that's fine, right? It's going to be okay as long as you do the right thing after doing that, right?
And it's getting worse in society, like this right side of history. Like, you're wrong, I have to just completely disown you and everything.
Mm-hmm. There's no reconciliation nowadays.
And it's hard to be on the other side of that because you don't get to just be like, well, okay, nuts to you, flip them the bird and walk away. Like, that's not necessarily the best way to do it. It's you are still a moral actor and have to make your choices. Walking away may be the right thing. Flipping the bird, maybe not. Maybe not getting angry over it. Maybe understanding they're wrong. It's because they went to public school or whatever you want, however you want to do. They went to the University of Las Vegas.
They didn't go to Notre Dame.
UNLV, baby.
Yeah.
Great school.
That's where we met.
It's actually not. One thing I was going to say before that I think is kind of interesting. Have you ever read a book called The Artist by James Joyce?
I have not read any Joyce.
Okay, so it's
I
a
am
book,
mixed about if I ever will.
it's a book that I absolutely hate, but it's a fantastic book because he's writing it to show how bad some things really are. So the whole point of the book is it's a story about this young man who is very academically inclined, and he goes off and tries to school himself in every single education, every single thought that exists. Eastern, African, European, everything. Like weird. He gets himself to everything. And it turns out to become a really big issue because as he gets more and more inspired and influenced by everything, he loses grasp on everything because he doesn't have a peg in any fight, right? He doesn't really have a stance on anything because he's on every side, right? And that's I found that is really the education in America. Is that what happens is like we really do try nowadays to instill every single thing, right? We try to like force feed all students like you can do this, you can do that, you can do this, you can do that. And as a result of it, students end up doing this or that or this and that, right? They do everything because they want to, because it's available to them.
You end up with your life being the cereal aisle at a grocery
Exactly.
store.
Yeah.
You end up with a bunch of 20-year-old pragmatists that have no idea what they want to do in life. They have no stance on anything, and they don't even know it, but they don't have really anything.
You can even go further. It's the social media. It's kids, so they're in school for it's gonna happen. What is it? Nora?
Party foul.
Party foul. If we have a napkin, we can get it later. Up there.
Yeah, we can get
Oh,
perfect.
They here. Fun reach. But so they're in school for most of the year and however many hours of the day. But then when they're not in school, they're on their phones. And their phones are giving them everything and anything and every single idea. And you can go on the internet and say you have an argument for something, why water is good for you. But you can also find an argument why water is bad for you. And so there's no true thought. And you talk about with your school, it's centered around Christ as well. Having that foundation to go back to. A lot of people, you probably can argue, especially in America, there's really no foundation that most people are going back to. We should. We have Christ. We have the Declaration of Independence. We have our founding. But we've strayed so far from that into, everything is just nothing.
It'd be like doing rock climbing or a ropes course or something like that. And when you have no firm foundation under you, it can freak you out if you're not ready for it.
Mm-hmm.
Part of what a classical education, I would argue, but particularly a Catholic one, provides is knowing that, one, there is something under you. It's there. It might not feel like it, but I promise you, it is there. You might be making a very small step over a very, very large chasm, but that step is the one link that leads to the next thing. That's why it's there. You know this is the only way. And I remember doing this. I was on a ropes course. I spent the entire time, I was going to go do this little, 1 foot maybe, jump. I couldn't. Because it was a jump. I was 25 feet in the air. Doesn't matter that I'm clipped
Right, no.
literally to high heaven. I couldn't do it. Because, Peter on water, I'm oh, people don't walk on water. This is bad. I didn't have any ability to get past that. I'd never done something like this before. And it wasn't until, we were ready to go and just that relaxing moment caused my brain to shut down and me to get out of my way just enough that I jumped. I don't remember jumping at all. My brain just literally completely checked out and I was able to do it.
A leap of faith.
true.
Sweet Indiana Jones, yes.
And so with, like, I mentioned social media, and we did mention social media a lot, 'cause I think it's very important, especially nowadays. Are you seeing...
Follow them on Instagram.
Yeah, we'll link
Actually,
the Instagram.
subscribe on YouTube too.
Yeah, we always forget to say that.
Make sure to find them on social media.
Yeah, we'll put it out there for them, so they can find it.
It
We'll
will
make
be
it.
posted on our page.
Yes.
This whole podcast, by the way.
And if you're not following us, I mean, what are you doing? But so social media it's a huge thing. It's obviously we all know about it, but in the normal public schools, everyone has social media. Most people have phones. I mean, iPad kids are a thing. Are you seeing a difference with your students where either they have phones or don't, based upon like their parent teaching? Is there any like rules in your school that kind of limit that, or how do you guys go about social media?
So, particularly with her phone policy, I like is you shouldn't have them. I mean, I understand like if your parents want you to have a cell phone because you're driving yourself to and from school, but it should stay in your locker and not be used during the school day. And if I see it, I'll warn you and be like, put that away. But after that, I take it and you don't have to pay me to get it back. It's in our handbook. The parents should all have read it and know that's literally what we're going to do because you don't need that. And, you know, a lot of my freshmen, a lot of the younger kids, they don't have one yet. That's not where they are. I have a lot of real good families, and we're very blessed to start small and build that culture where phones aren't necessarily it. But then as they get older and they start getting phones, you notice as the references they make in class start changing. Like, I can tell how much tech use is going on behind the scenes at home because it's there and it's insipid and it's boiling down a lot of the students' ability to think on their own and come up with their own ideas. And it is cutting down the creativity of my classrooms by at least 30% of what it could be.
Wow.
Because, oh, this is like a meme. Ha ha ha. And one of the worst parts is I'm not immune to it. I know that I am just as bad, maybe not as bad because I was blessed to grow up before there were smartphones.
I was going to say, you're probably...
I knew college before there was Facebook. My hips are fine. But that was probably one of the things that made college so much better. Like, we didn't even have Wi-Fi my first 2 years. No, we got it my second year. Around, like, there were some places that had Wi-Fi. But if you were going to use a computer, you were going to your dorm room and plugging into the landline. Cell phones didn't work in the dorms because they were all built like bunkers or things like that.
Cement walls.
You had the cell phone sitting in the window. When it rang, you grabbed it and sprinted to the door hoping it didn't drop the call. There was one guy who had a Bluetooth headset. And I'm like,
dude, how?
and he was like, beep. The phone would like just open up a little to answer the call.
That's funny.
And he could just stay in his dorm room and like, you were living a life of a king.
You said something before when Mike asked you that question about, you know, kind of why parents should consider going to sort of, you know, the Chesterton school as opposed to, you know, staying homeschooled and stuff like that. And just one of the things that you didn't say it expressly, but one of the things that you kind of inferred was the fact that, you know, a Catholic school has that focus of the Catholic identity where a homeschool parent might not be able to put that focus because it's not her full-time job. Like, she's focusing on being a mother at the same time as trying to just educate that her child that 1 + 1 is in fact 2, right? It's difficult to do. Your school has that focus, and it's really important for it. Social media is designed to basically destroy your focus by feeding you so many different things. And your school really is the antithesis of what social media is and what it has essentially become nowadays, right?
Yeah, and it's real great that you pointed out that motherhood line because that is a huge job, and it takes a lot of effort to go and do both. Chesterton has a great line like about how important it is to teach, like what is teaching someone 2 + 2 is 4 versus, you know, being everything to one person, like Francis is to Kiara. Francis says, my daughter loves me. I sometimes have my doubts. Yeah, that's right. That's going to be saved for posterity. There's now a record of how mean you've been to Papa.
She'll see this in like 10 years and be like, oh, yeah, hey, Daddy.
What was I going?
You're talking about motherhood and how it's everything and that they're superior to us husbands.
And they have so many things they need to worry about. and I'm just gonna let that one slide.
There was no comment.
You have a wonderful husband, Ashley.
Thank you.
Um,
I don't know why I said thank you.
Trade
Sorry.
well, trade well.
Yeah. All right, go ahead.
But one of the reasons humans live in cities is it's a lot easier for me to focus on doing one thing and getting better at that one or two things than it is for me to, I've got to till the dirt, I've got to grow the wheat, I've got to weed, I've got to plant this, I've got to make sure that these pastures are getting rotated. Oh, I also have to go and shear the sheep and make the wool and get the fabric, and like, it's a huge amount of work to try and just do that as one household. And there are plenty of families who've gone off the grid and are doing it, and impressively so. But then comes time for education, and how do you get a kid the fullness of human wisdom when you're basically doing all the things that are survival level? And I'm sure there's a bunch of people who I also like and respect who will be yelling at me right now about how I'm just a nilly-muggins or something.
No, but like life is very easy right now because most people do have the ability to not have to live on a farm. They get to have the ability to be in a city and do all those things. And now like we have like with social media, everything's at our fingertips. And there's companies even like Amazon that just give us what we need within like a day or two.
You mean the Great Satan?
So I did that intro because I know you do have a lot to say about Amazon.
Yes, I do.
I so badly want to hear it. All right, let's get the mic close. We're all ready. I think that was pretty smooth. I'm not even gonna lie.
We wanted to hit you with that.
If you say that you are for the free market, or that you care about small business, and you regularly shop at Amazon for things you could easily buy another place, you are a liar.
You
So
can do
it
that,
doesn't.
look at that camera
Oh.
too.
Yeah.
Just your
If-
next point.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, you know what? Second verse, same as the first. If you claim that you love the free market or love small business, and you buy things you could easily get somewhere else off of the Great Satan, you are a liar. And I heard controversy generates good engagement, right?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Your subscribers are about to double. So, I used to, like everyone else, be an Amazon Prime member and gloriously shop there and get my 2-day shipping. It was phenomenal. But then I realized, like, wait, I'm spending a bit of money on here that I don't necessarily need to. And then I was also reading a lot of Chesterton, who is very small business focused, more like, no, more people should have their own small business. Like, that's really the core of distributism. It's like, no, there should be more capitalists, not fewer. And one of the problems is how, I mean, especially after COVID, right? Amazon is the market. That's not a free market. That is they are gatekeepers. If they don't like what you're doing, they can just take it off their site. And now you've lost access to, but they help my small businesses survive. Yeah, by holding a knife to their neck. And then at the meantime, like, your mom and pop shop down the corner is closing. So you're hoping and praying to God that Amazon has something, because you're now in the habit of not planning ahead and thinking about what you might need for the future. Because what does it matter when I can get it in less than an hour? Or it's free. No, Amazon would never do that because they failed too many orders. Like, it causes us to stop planning ahead. It's disciplining us. Just like fasting from food strengthens you in other ways. Because you're working on self-discipline. It's working on it the other way. It's cold showers, Exodus 90. How do you know someone's doing Exodus 90? Don't worry, they'll tell you.
So, or you'll smell them.
I never had a problem with the cold showers. Granted, apparently my version of a hot shower doesn't even steam up a bathroom mirror. But. So, you have all these little mom and pop shops, all these smaller businesses, and they can't sustain themselves because a lot of the raw materials have to come from Amazon. So now they're still giving a cut, and so part of the money that they make isn't even staying in our state.
Okay, right.
It's going out to Amazon. Like, I think every time you spend at like Starbucks or an Amazon or something like that, about 33 cents on the dollar stays local.
Okay, so yeah, 66% of it is leaving.
versus
Right.
a small business where it's about 85%. Do you know where that 15 is going? To like
Bezos.
no, well maybe to that, but to things like taxes.
Yeah.
Right.
Uncle Sam is only taking like 5 or 10%. Jeff Bezos is taking 70, and you're telling me the government is evil, but you're okay with Amazon taking 70% of your dollar for themselves.
At least Elon Musk is okay.
Elon Musk is nice because he's a disruptive force.
Mm.
I don't think he needs to be like this conservative hero. I don't. That's not who he is.
Absolutely not.
But it is fun in that he just sees a lot of stupidity and it's like, well, no. Like, I just don't like that. And I have enough money now that I can change the market for myself. And he's not that team player with a lot of these other people all the way.
He is more of a classical liberal than
Yeah.
anything else. Yeah, he's 100% not conservative, but he's not a progressive liberal in the sense of what a modern liberal is nowadays. I was going to say to your point, though, there is something that is incredibly symbolic of what you just said, because we've experienced it even here in Akron. There used to be a gigantic mall right off of West Exchange.
Rolling Acres. I
Right.
grew up going to that mall.
Yeah, I was just going to say, because that mall used to house how many different businesses, right? It closed.
And now upon
and
it
now what
sits
is
the
it?
warehouse of the great Satan, our idol to mammon that you can see for miles. And you know what's great? Our city council and mayor, they were talking about this backroom deal about what was going to happen with the old Rolling Acres site. And it was all done in, like, the cigar room that we used to make fun of, like, political deals in, like, the 20s. And, oh, that's what started World War I. It's like, well, now we have Amazon, and they're not paying any taxes to us. Like, you're giving a tax rebate for 30 years? Like, guess what? All those jobs that you're touting, those are going to be automated as soon as Amazon can actually get it done.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah. By the time they would have to start paying taxes, there won't be any workers there for it to really even matter.
you've sacrificed
Yeah.
the jobs. You've made the local Akron area now like, oh, we can get things faster. So now we are less likely to have the discipline to wait an hour or think ahead on what we need. You're actually killing Akron's ability to plan and have self-discipline, or the desire to, why would I get dressed? Because obviously I'm not going to put on pants and look like a human being. I'm dressed like a schlub at home, and go out. Like, this entire trip is going to take an hour and 20 minutes. I can just get a drone, or whatever they're going to have dropping packages off by the time they automate everything, right? And they don't treat those workers well. A lot of like, oh, well, you can get stock options in this. Like, if you survive 2 years, how many Amazon workers stay for 2 years? They don't. It's a miserable experience.
And I'm guessing your opinion probably is the
My
same
fact.
with your fact. Your fact.
Yes.
I apologize. Goes to like Uber Eats, DoorDash, when you don't have to go anywhere anymore.
Do you not have a friend who likes you?
You like me?
Yeah, somewhat.
Yeah, we're here together.
Yeah.
It's absolutely crazy, like what is happening that most people just don't realize. They don't take a second to step back and go, wait a minute.
Because what are you doing with that free time?
Right.
Great, now I can work harder so I can afford the subscription services. So I can do more Spotify listening while I'm just putting Spotify on as background music. I don't care what I'm listening to. I just can't take the silence.
Yeah.
Like, you're paying, I don't know, what is it? What do you pay for Spotify? $16 a month?
Yeah, it's about 16.
Yeah,
16.
about 16.
Depend on your plan, but yeah, I play 16.
To just train yourself not to listen to your environment, to not appreciate good music versus bad music, because you're just getting that same 4-chord satisfaction that basically every song is. And a couple people have done videos of this where they're playing a simple 4-chord melody and they're switching to all these different popular songs across multiple genres, and it's just this quick resolution that gives you endorphins and it moves on. You can't listen to classical music anymore because it takes longer to appreciate.
Yes. It takes too long.
So, and things like Twitter, everything on Facebook, right? Because now Facebook has those little reel shorts, whatever, and those are 10 seconds of.
Can be.
TikTok ruined everything because TikTok.
I thought it was Vine.
Well, Vine.
Oh, yeah, if we were to get
Vine
the
was
roots of
definitely
it.
the start of it, but even Vine, Vine failed because they didn't do it properly. because Vine had pauses
Addictively
in
enough.
between the videos, right? TikTok took out the pause in between the videos because when you were on Vine, you still had kind of a wall that you were going down. Whereas when it switched to TikTok, they understood that it needed to be more of a wheel concept. So you're just spinning the wheel around, and as you spin it around, there's just a new image that pops up as you take it down, right? So TikTok really is the one that really revolutionized and kind of really destroyed our, what do you call it?
Attention span.
You forgot.
Yeah,
Yeah, is that funny?
because he had TikTok, and it's completely ruined his brain. That's what's hard with like social media, like with producing content is like I had to repeatedly like I'll get TikTok to post on TikTok, and then I'm like realizing, oh wait, I just spent 30 minutes on TikTok. I didn't realize I spent 30 minutes on TikTok, and having to delete and put it on my computer. And
Because
it's
that's
crazy.
what they hire people who, that's an entire job, is to game the system so that you keep on looking.
They're
And you
good at
don't-
it.
Yeah, they hire the best, like, with all the ad revenue from eyeballs on
Yeah.
screens, like, they can afford a lot of money.
They really can.
Um,
But I think one of our phones is getting close to dying. But this has been absolutely.
and again, it is the phone that dictates life.
110%. This has been absolutely amazing. But so we liked our guests. This is a newer thing to leave our audience with something.
The takeaway.
Yeah, the takeaway, the call to action.
I took notes.
You did.
Yes, he did.
Well, what is your last thing you want to leave our audience?
Put down your phone and go read a good or great book. Don't turn it off, turn it on silent, drop it in the toilet so you can't even look at it anymore, run it over, like whatever you have to do that, and go pick up a book and sit and read with it. Because you'll have to start generating your own content. You'll have to become a creator. You'll have to become an influencer of yourself.
YouTuber.
Podcaster.
So I think that's the best thing I can come off with
Mhm.
is free yourself, be less of a slave to technology.
Where can people find more information about the Chesterton Academy?
So we have a website, of course, akronchesterton.org.
Okay.
akronchesterton.org, you know.
Yeah, we will definitely put it in the look for that.
Yeah, so you'll be able to find a bunch of network schools. There's over 40 right now. You can find us on Facebook,
Oh,
Akron Chesterton.
he sold out.
And it is like, I was doing Exodus 90 when we started the academy. And here I am, for work purposes, having to be on Facebook. Hating it so much. Because I didn't use Facebook when we started the academy.
No, you have
Then I
to.
find myself having to use it. I'm like, this is the worst. Then I suddenly find myself like, oh, I need to go make sure there's post or like it or do this and that or the other thing. And then next thing I know, it's 20 minutes later and I'm going to be late to work if I don't hurry up and get dressed.
You know what we should tell people? If you really want to get off social media, start working in social media because you'll realize how much you hate it when you have to treat it like a job.
Oh yeah.
It sucks.
Because they're making shorts. I always text Ben, all right, more dopamine. How can we get more dopamine? How do we get people to stay on? But 100% get off your phone. Actually go read a book. I want to read books this year. I had a
Find someone to read them with.
Yes.
And invite them over to your house like a person. And sit down. Maybe you just read quietly together. Maybe one of you reads out loud and reacts to things.
Mm-hmm.
This is my wife and I actually do that.
Yeah.
I'll read something out loud, or I will just read it and I will try to summarize it for her, and she will either critique or question or do follow-ups, and then we find out that we both end up understanding the text a lot better because iron sharpens iron. You have that human connection, that human conversation, and then it's not actually just you and whoever else is reading with you. It's
Yep.
the person who wrote the book.
Yeah.
You're having a dialogue, you're having a conversation with that idea.
Mm-hmm.
And it'll do so much more for you than that hour of snapmatogram or whatever you're going to do.
Snap. That's good.
It doesn't matter. They're all the same. They're all hyper addictive and just trying to isolate and ruin us.
Yeah, and they're doing a decent job, but this is the antithesis of that. I used that word twice today. But thank you so much, Rocco.
Thank you guys for having me on. This was really
Yeah.
fun.
This is
This is awesome.
amazing. And this has been Podcast 28.
We're out.
Thank you. We're out.
Well, that's good.